clearly these people have moved on from butchering fictional tales to butchering mythological tales.
Being really good at flying and staying in the sky.
It's like, did you even read that?
Liberal Currents presents Half the Answer with your hosts, Caitlin M. Green and Trent R. Nelson.
Well, happy days are coming. They're coming. We're making them come. It's going to happen again. And this is Half the Answer, where understanding a question is half the answer. I am your co-host, Caitlin Green, and with me, of course, is Trent Nelson. We are writers and editors for Liberal Currents. We are respectively a linguist and a philosopher, historian, and we are here to discuss yet again just the most fun possible thing you can think of. So, Trent, how's it going, and who did you bring me?
It's going swell. I'm battling. It's like the hordes of orcs are outside the door. The illness is everywhere. Everyone's getting sick. The sniffles and the snuffles. It's outrageous. We hope all of our listeners and viewers are getting better, as we hope Caitlin is getting better. She's been struggling on this thing for seemingly months. All right.
I'm becoming enraged by the sound of these recent episodes because my voice is so goopy and gloopy. And I don't like it. Like, I'm one of those rare people who actually does like the sound of my voice on recordings, because as a field linguist, you get used to your own voice because you're like transcribing hours and hours of your own recording of your voice, like interviewing people and doing participant observation and stuff. And so, like, I don't mind my voice until now. Like, now I'm so mad about it because it sounds like illness.
I am become snot, stuffer of noses. Indeed. Yeah, indeed. Well, Caitlin, we've got some terrible stuff to talk about today, but that's almost every week, seemingly. We've got a great guest as well. Their name is Gillian Brockell, really wonderful individual, writer. She wears so many hats as well. Mom, former staff writer at WAPO, but she escaped, thankfully. That's how she's here.
I took the first buyout before everything went to shit.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I was like, I'm going to take this pile of money, write a book, and I'll be right back.
Yeah,
and then
totally.
Everything happened while I was out, and I'm not going to go back.
Oh my gosh, you're like the guy who went out for like a bathroom break before the whole bank was held up or something. Like,
yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
My dear mother, she always used to say, she still does. She's a listener of the program. Shout out to Mom. Timing is everything in life. Gillian, great timing to be sure, as that gentleman who left the bank also had very good timing. Well, you can find her work all over. That's like Rolling Stone and Zateo and the American Prospect, Mother Jones.
Upcoming, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Gillian, let's just get right into it. The United States government, well, we know what they're up to. They're up to everything not great right now, whether it's destroying healthcare or destroying our communities or sending federal agents in to terrorize us. Well, so often, I think, we talk about, obviously on this program we've done it often, what is ICE doing? What is Border Patrol doing? What are they doing at the ICE facilities? Deporting people, destroying families. I mean, our co-host, she is famous in the community for bringing stuffed animals to the children, to the facilities. That is a admirable innovation. But Gillian,
it wasn't my idea. I just literally asked PERC what they wanted, and they were like, well, these kids are nervous for their appointment, so something to hold is good. So.
Caitlin, you didn't ask for this fame. All right, it was thrust upon you, and we accept that here. But Gillian, there are the people that are getting deported. Well, they've got to be transported some way, and you've been covering what we're going to be calling ICE Air. What can you tell us about this next level of hell that we've got to discuss? How are they capitalizing on the terror of this administration, how are corporations capitalizing on this while moving people to places like Uganda?
Oh, big question. Yeah, so ICE Air is all of the charter airlines and to a smaller extent military planes that are transporting people from where they're being captured to detention centers, between detention centers, and then also out of the country. I think people only are thinking about deportation flights when they're thinking about that, but actually, that's only about a quarter of ICE Air's flights. Most of them are domestic transfers and shuttle flights. And they're increasing more and more, especially the shuttle flights. There's a really great place called Human Rights First. They have the ICE Flight Monitor. They do monthly reports tracking all of the ICE Air flights. And they've seen about an 80% increase in ICE flights year over year. But the domestic shuttle flights have more than doubled. And so what a lot of migrants, immigration attorneys, and activists are saying is that they're using these flights as an extension of, the cruelty to sort of wear people down, make it harder for them to fight their immigration cases so that they'll just give up and agree to be voluntarily removed from the country. Every time someone is moved to a different detention center, a lot of the times they have to start their court proceedings and their filings all over again. They're farther away from the family members. It gets harder for them to contact, harder to talk to their lawyers. Their cases can move to just different jurisdictions. But it isn't just about that. The actual flights themselves are, in my opinion, torture. So every single adult passenger and some children on ICE flights are shackled at the wrists and ankles to a chain, and that's attached to a chain around their waists. And I used to be a flight attendant before I was a journalist. And everything you learn in flight attending school is about keeping the aisle clear, keeping everything clear in the event of an evacuation. That's why we're asking you to, put your seat backs and tray tables and up before landing. That's why, you have to put your bag in front of you instead of behind. Exactly. Because everything has to be clear. So the fact that they're doing this, if there's an emergency evacuation, how are people getting off the plane? Are they tripping? And we know from previous reporting that this has happened between, I believe it was 2014 and 2022. We know that there were at least 6 emergency evacuations of ICE aircraft. Every flight attendant is trained to evacuate an aircraft within 90 seconds with only half of the exits working. You have to re-qualify that every year, prove that you can still do that every year. Only 2 of the evacuation times for these flights, these emergency evacuations, are known, and they were 2.5 minutes and 7 minutes, which is, it's lucky that we're lucky that people haven't died already. A lot of flight attendants, ProPublica did a great story last year talking to Global X flight attendants, which is Global X is ICE's main charter. A lot of flight attendants who talked to ProPublica last year say that it's a disaster waiting to happen, and I agree. Beyond just the safety issues, there's also they'll put hoods over people's heads if they talk back, if they are deemed unruly, and you can be deemed unruly if you ask for your attorney, right? And there's the wrap device, which is like basically a straitjacket. They'll put people in that. This is particularly prevalent on flights to Africa, which really indicates ICE's just inborn level of racism. And and so beyond just the safety issues from a flight attendant's perspective, it's painful. It's painful to be shackled for a long time. It's painful. They can't stand up and stretch. You have to ask a guard's permission to stand. There are somewhere between 5 to 30 guards on every ICE air flight. There will be 1 or 2 ICE agents, and then ICE contracted guards from Geo Group or Akima Global Services is another big one. And, they swear at people, they curse at people. If you have a guard who is in a bad mood, which is a lot of them, they won't let you get up to use the restroom. So I've read a lot of reports from migrants, and I've talked to an employee at Avello a while ago who said that it's pretty regular occurrence that a migrant is soiling themselves in their seats because the guard won't let them stand up.
Yeah, and again, like, it is easy to say, and very true to say, that all of this shows a level of contempt towards humanity, which is repulsive, which is sickening. But I have been struck by the desire to shackle, the desire to hood. All of these things are very much projections, right? This is meant so that the American people start to look at these folks as criminals and not as people who are simply here looking for a better life or are violating some type of civil thing which has no criminal standing, right? I mean, it's all very performative insofar as trying to make us not care about these people. And it's really sickening.
DHS, they do the same sort of like suffering porn videos that they do, that they did at CCOT. They do that with, like slow-mo things of lines of shackled passengers going onto aircraft. You can get tons of photos, that the media can use of shackled people being marched onto ICE aircraft.
And I just want to say, Caitlin, I just want to say that if 1934 was 2020, that the Nazis their Nazis Twitter account would also have all of the most repulsive videos on it, the TikToks of people being stripped of their shit.
Yeah, it's like maximum ghoulishness, and they're doing it, with the backing soundtrack of the like na 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 na. Right? Like they're celebrating, they're gloating, and they're not just trying to make them look like criminals too. They're trying to make them look and feel like animals, right? They're like shackled up, dirty, because no one's allowed them to become undirty, and forced to soil themselves. Like, it reminds me of our conversation with Spencer Ackerman, right, about the humiliation being a major component, right? To really psychologically destroy somebody as well. As all the other unacceptable things.
Absolutely. And again, I'm glad you brought Spencer up. And obviously, Forever War is a great website. Everyone should go visit and contribute and all that. It's just another callback from all of this stuff was really bad. But we didn't get rid of like a president's ability to do all of this bad stuff, even though when it was happening the first time, we were like, oh, this is real bad, right? And now it's just, fermented and become even more grotesque. And now we say to ourselves, what do you do with a man who has already literally truthed that he's only constrained by his own moral ideology at this point? I mean, psychotic.
Which is like two brain cells fighting.
Yeah.
That's
his morality.
Is. Yeah.
Trump's strong in personal sense of morality that he has. He's following that. So we don't need to worry.
He's famous for that, of course.
And to be clear, this practice of shackling migrants on ICE flights began, we think, around 2012 during the Obama administration. Before that time, most migrants were deported from the country on commercial flights, just as passengers with, an ICE guard or whoever it was before that sitting next to them. But during the Obama administration, it moved to these charter planes where there's more privacy, more masking, shall we say. And that's when the shackling started. It seems like it started with just male passengers. And then it was men and women.
Why?
And then it was some kids too. I don't know. I could not tell you. It's not necessary for the security of the flight. There's an armored aircraft door on every airplane.
Right.
They can't take over the aircraft. They can't hijack it. There's no, and there are guards on every plane. So what is the point of shackling? It's just humiliation.
Yeah. I mean, again, 2012. You think back to that, and that is not supposed to be when all of the bad things happen. We were supposed to get better things in 2012. I remember I was there. Turns out that's not true.
Right. Oh, and sorry, just to finish that thought. So, that practice started under Obama, increased under Trump the first time. When Biden took over, he really didn't slow down the operation all that much. So, that's one of the sort of weird things of how well the propaganda worked of, Biden being open borders and so loose on immigration. And actually, he kept a number of Trump's policies and kept up the pace of deportations.
But we talk about that all the time.
Skyrocketed again.
We talk about that all the time insofar as they say that we say something, we get weirded out and say, well, I guess we have to do those policies. But then they don't say, well, look, they've done those policies, so they deserve to be followed. They're like, oh, there's still weak open borders Biden, which would have been a much better nickname, to be fair.
And yet we don't learn the lesson somehow. And when I say we, I mean they, because I'm not interested in playing that game. But yeah, the idea that, they're saying that I'm weak on crime or I'm weak on borders or whatever. So I'm going to go out there as a candidate and say, I'm brave enough to acknowledge that there's a crisis at the border or whatever. And I'm going to be really tough about it, actually. So you should vote for me. There's no upside to that. There really isn't, because they're still going to call you an open borders Marxist anyway. And in the meantime, people are suffering.
Yeah, the sort of I'm a Republican, but not as bad, sort of strategy of Democratic politics, that's been going on for decades now, is clearly a failure. It's a total failure. And, people don't like fake people. And they even if someone disagrees with a policy, like not shackling migrants, if you stand on your business, if you say, this is what I believe and this is what I'm doing, it's always more successful.
Yes. Yeah, people respond to it for sure. Yeah, and also there's just nothing cool in being like, oh, I'm a lot like the Republicans, but I'm not going to give you the evil little thrill of hurting people, because that's the whole brand. And what are you doing?
Right. And if your pitch to people is I'm a Republican, but not as bad, well, the Republicans aren't going to vote for you because they can just vote for a Republican.
Right.
No, we're going to get those swing voters. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
They're going to come flocking to us.
I was struck, Gillian, because again, so often we hear, the sort of narrative that I voiced, a moment ago, right? We had this negativity, and then now it's back, right? But as you alluded to, so many of the things that we are dealing with today, the reason why they weren't eliminated by Obama or by Biden is because they continued to use them. They continued to do the stuff. They continued to be a part of, as Spencer would say, that forever war, that forever violence against others, striking drone strikes or blowing up somebody like Anwar al-Awlaki, or, I mean, it's all very bad. And what seems even worse about it, Gillian, is that companies are making money on this. Can you tell us about how these airlines, these people are benefiting from the suffering of others?
Yeah, so we don't have a current price list. We don't know exactly how much they're making right now. A 2023 price list from ICE's current broker, CSI Aviation. The most of these planes are making about $15,000 per flight hour, plus expenses, so fuel, insurance, all of that. And so CSI, I think between February and the end of October, received, $562 million from ICE for compensation for these planes. And it can be more than that. So Omni, which my Mother Jones story next month will be all about Omni. Omni appears to make something in the range of $30,000 per flight hour. They have larger aircraft, and they're also the only ones, the only large jet carrier right now that will do ICE flights to Africa and Asia. And so they put like a special high risk fee on every one of these flights,
of course,
for reasons unclear. Yeah. And so they're making a huge amount of money. I will have more, reporting on that soon. But the other thing too that I think has gone kind of under the radar that is really like something I try to talk about a lot is that with the third country removals, the non-citizens that are being removed to countries they've never been to and put, in prisons in Africa, those are happening on private jets. And they're private jets that are operated by a company called Journey Aviation. But the jets are owned by rich people. And like, it's all just like another extension of the grift, because if you own a private jet and you lend it, you lease it to a charter airline on the days that you're not using it, it'll qualify you for a tax break, a huge tax break. This is the thing that Trump did in his first term, was this tax break. So rich people are, making money off of their planes being used to send people to prisons in Africa. And they're shackled on these planes. And I just can't get over the image in my mind. For like 8 months, I've been thinking about this, of just shackled people who, have been part of this underclass that we have allowed to remain that way, for decades, on just a lap of luxury. Like, I've never been on a private jet, but I can see pictures of these planes on the Journey Aviation website, and being, put on like a private jet to hell, to a country you've never been to. You don't speak the language. Some of them are in civil wars. A lot of these prisons are known torture prisons, according to the State Department.
Yeah.
I had a story in the Teo, I believe in October, about the second third country removal to Eswatini in southern Africa. This is, Africa's last absolute monarchy. I actually reported there when I was like a baby reporter in 2011. I was able to figure out who owned the airplane, who owned this private jet that Journey was operating. And it was these billionaires that did a bunch of Trump-branded hotels with him. And, made a bunch of money with Trump, still support Trump, have donated a bunch to, America First PACs and this and that. And, I'm like, do they even know that their plane is being used for this? And I haven't been able to get a response from anyone. Anytime I report something about Journey, I ask them for comment. They have yet to reply.
Sure.
I try and ask the owners of these private jets to reply. Never got an answer. So
I know. I just was thinking about, like, I know a lot of these wealthy, billionaires and stuff, they use their jets to like send their children to and from college, so I was like, I can't imagine like putting my kid on our plane to be like, have fun at Harvard, honey. And then like knowing that the last person to sit in that seat was like shackled there and not allowed, and was heading to a torture prison. Like out of control. But again, being a billionaire is a form of brain damage. So who knows? Maybe they don't care.
I mean, it's interesting because with so much of the sort of oligarchy that we live under, the costs are externalized, right? They're put way out there. So there are layers in between shell companies and different things so that you're never directly part of the human rights abuse. I mean, think about the minerals that we get for our iPhones or the conditions in the iPhone factories, right? But that's a contractor. That's not, Apple doesn't actually own that factory, right? So they just sort of like externalize it and push it out. And these private jets, to me, is like this great mashing up where it's suddenly happening in the place where the money is going. Yeah. The cruelty, the money being made off this cruelty is happening in the place. I just can't stop thinking about it, as you can see.
I'm just going on my vacation to like the Virgin Islands or whatever on my nice fancy jet, and I'm not going to think about who was in the seat before. It's not important.
Well, that's actually where the billionaire went with his private jet for New Year's. So,
fine. Oh yeah, they were all in the same place for the night, weren't they? Yeah. And yet nothing interesting happened. The orcas failed us.
The orcas failed us. Yeah, that would have been the funniest story to report on. We would have still had Gillian on. It seems to me that and of course, I don't know. I'm only surmising, but I don't think that many of these people care. I don't think that they let it bother them. I don't think they let it keep them up at night. And I think that they're actually very grateful for all of the imagery that the administration is putting up that shows these people in hoods with shackles, right? Because now I am playing a positive part in my community,
I'm cleaning up this country. Yeah.
I'm a good person. Look at me. I'm donating my private jet. Mm-hmm. I mean, what a good American.
It's either that, right? It's either that or it's like, well, I don't love it, but somebody was going to do it and I might as well get the tax breaks. Like it was going to happen with or without me, right? Right?
That's the Hagen excuse, right? Yeah. That these CEOs have to do bad things because if they don't do the bad thing, they'll get replaced by somebody who's going to do a bad thing. Yeah.
If they didn't use my plane, they would use Jeff's plane, and I hate Jeff. He doesn't deserve the tax breaks. I do.
Right. Jeff doesn't really care for the country like I do. He's just an opportunist.
I just want to say one more thing about the people who have been sent to these African prisons. I think there's a lot of misinformation about them. I can't share too much detail because I need to protect people, but all of the people sent to South Sudan, Eswatini, and Equatorial Guinea have been convicted of crimes, and in some cases serious crimes. However, all of those people, their sentences were done. So, and some of them had been out for a very long time, for years. And because they were from countries, like Cuba or Laos, that wouldn't issue a travel document for them, they have been able to stay in the U.S. and they're living quiet, productive lives, married with kids, and until ICE came and snatched them up last year. Right. So they're being sent to these prisons without being charged or convicted of a new crime in our jurisdiction or in theirs.
Wow.
And it's this sort of just indefinite thing where, we're not supposed to deport people to a country that is just going to deport them to the place where they have a withholding of removal. It's called chain refoulement. It's against domestic and international law. And yet that's exactly what they're doing. Each of these countries says, well, our objective is to just get them back to their country of origin. And I didn't mention Ghana, but they have done more of these third country removals than the other countries. And they're sort of doing like a combination where there's like a brief imprisonment and then they're forcing them straight back to their country of origin. But in some cases, they have just forced people to cross the border into Togo with no travel documents, which renders them effectively stateless. You can't even get a Western Union from your family in the United States if you don't have identification. And so, and a lot of the people sent to Ghana have no criminal record whatsoever. Some of them were valid asylum seekers. There was one woman that the New Yorker reported on who is a survival of female genital mutilation, who was put on one of these prison flights. And a lot of the people with convictions, they're not violent. Like there's a conspiracy to commit fraud. Like, how is this man my enemy?
Right.
Well, we are, and I've been rage baited right now because unfortunately, and we've spoken about this, I believe, with John Pfaff as well in the past, that there is this idea, perhaps even Medea, there's this idea that that like if somebody does something really bad, that it's like okay that we shackle them and keep them in a dungeon and have a hood on them, and that is absolutely not the punishment for doing a crime. The punishment for doing a crime is being removed from society and kept in.
You've paid your debt, right? Like that's the
according to a judge, right?
Yeah,
so like, if all of these people were released, that means a judge thought that's how long their sentence should be. You might not like that.
But the idea that you could that it would be morally acceptable to send somebody to South Sudan because they've done something in the past that they've already paid, and we've already determined this was bad. This is what you should do to become back into the society. All well, good and done. Nobody deserves to be held in a dungeon for even the worst thing you can think of. It's not acceptable, and it's not how we do things. No.
We're supposed to be more civilized than that, right? And we're supposed to believe in the idea of rehabilitation, right? That like you did a crime, maybe it was so awful, but you were assigned, a consequence for that. You served your time. You're supposed to be allowed to re-enter society. And yet we have so many structures and ideologies that absolutely prevent that. For these people, it's extradition and being shackled and put on these planes and all of the awful, awful things that we do to them and allow to be done to them. And for American citizens, it's all the things that we do to stop people from being able to build a life after they get out of prison as well,
Right. I mean, a lot of this is, I think, an extension of just, the criminalization of African Americans has been going on for decades, and it gets everyone, right? And so it gets these people from this other, underclass. Yeah. And what's really interesting to me, so there's one woman, her stories have already been reported on quite a bit, and I talked to her recently, named Melissa Tran. She's originally from Vietnam. She came here as a refugee when she was 11. When she was 18 or 19, she was arrested for theft. She stole from her employer. She said she was in an abusive relationship at the time, that the boyfriend was telling her to do this. So she was, and she was caught. She paid restitution. She had a jail sentence. She served it. She was out by, I think, 21, went to college, became a healthcare worker, got married, had 4 children, owns a nail salon in Hagerstown, which is like, small town, like kind of conservative Maryland, and apparently was a beloved person there. But she came here legally with a green card as a refugee, but because of her conviction, she had that removed. She, had her legal status removed in her early 20s, which when she, was pleading her case, her lawyer did not warn her that was going to happen or that could happen. And she said, well, maybe I wouldn't have pled guilty if I had known that. I thought I was doing the right thing by saying sorry. Yeah. And so, but because Vietnam for decades, they won't issue a travel document for people who left before a certain amount of time.
Right.
She hasn't been able to be removed to Vietnam, so she has gone to her ICE check-ins every year, and we don't have a structure to give someone's legal status back to them for like good behavior. There's no expungement of having your green card taken away. And so she's been living in this sort of in-between stage for decades. And just this past summer, all of a sudden, Vietnam and Laos and some other countries that didn't issue travel documents for a long time are issuing travel documents. And a lot of people think, I don't have the evidence yet, but a lot of people say it's because of the tariffs, that they're using the tariffs as a bludgeon of, you need to issue travel documents for these people that we've had here for decades, to get rid of them. Otherwise, we're going to keep the tariffs at 85% or whatever.
The loss, the civil disabilities that one acquires, we often talk about it in the context of state laws and state rights that an individual has within those states. But that is a really, really interesting thing that I've never even thought of, that this person had civil disabilities like on a macro sense, right? Like like national, international disabilities. I mean, that is just unacceptable. And it feels like we probably don't have any of those things because up until probably relatively recently, like we might not have been in a situation where like we were removing like people's, and then there's no chance for them to get it back. But now that we're here and we're just like looking for opportunities to strip people of, the ability to be here, this is going to be probably a big problem moving forward, one suspects.
Yeah, I mean, there are hundreds at least of people being removed under the same circumstances that I just described right now. And, I think it's just one small aspect of like the failure to pass any kind of immigration reform for decades, that there's no legal apparatus to give someone their status back. And, you just think like, well, if you came here as a refugee, as a child, you might have experienced some childhood trauma. And we know that sometimes young people commit crimes when they have childhood trauma, and then they go to therapy, they become adults, everything's fine, and there's no, that understanding just doesn't extend. There's no legal way to extend a more modern understanding of crime to these people.
Yeah. And they're stuck in this like forever parole where they're constantly having to check in, and then all of a sudden it can all be taken away with no real change on their part. She was just kind of holding up her end indefinitely, and then the government was like, actually all done.
Yeah.
Which is, it's just not something you could do with a person who was like a born citizen.
Absolutely. And so as we talk about these companies, individual, folks who are also participating in this, offering their planes up, having their planes used, that is all as horrendous as we could possibly imagine, until we imagine that DHS is looking to purchase planes themselves, right? Because why subcontract it out when you could just have her all as a part of the system? And I'd love to talk about this, but I would be remiss if I did not mention that we gotta mark Daedalus Aviation down along with
Daedalus?
Right. Similar. Right. We're familiar with the Greeks. Clearly, these people have moved on from butchering fictional tales to butchering mythological tales. We suspect.
Really good at flying and staying in the sky. Daedalus.
It's like, did you even read that? But no, the folks behind Daedalus, they've got like 10 shell companies, and they're all like obscure Greek and Roman mythological figures. And it'll be like healthcare solutions, data solutions, blah, 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 with like a Greek thing in front of it. And yeah, so some of this has already been reported. Some of this I'm reporting this, for the first time here. But so Daedalus, there was some reporting in the fall in Mother Jones with Dan Friedman and Nick Schwellenbach, and some reporting in the Washington Post with Jacob Bogich in December. That there's this company, Daedalus, who has been given a $140 million contract to facilitate the purchase of DHS's own planes, their own fleet of 737s, 6 of them. And so, recently people were really excited that Avelo announced that they weren't going to be doing ICE flights anymore. Well, what I have to tell people, and what I've been kind of like, different activists have been contacting me like, yay, isn't it great? And I'm like, well, what happened is that Daedalus bought the Avelo planes. And so they now have these planes. 4 of them have gone through the process now. My Avelo source says there are probably 2 more. Some of them appear to be in Lake Charles, Louisiana right now, according to flight tracking apps, which is a common place where people go to get new liveries, new paint jobs on their planes. And so that appears to be those planes. Now, I will say there's a lot more to running an airline than just buying planes. You need pilots, you need flight attendants, you need ground crew, and it's unclear if DHS intends on training their own crew, or if they're still just going to continue to subcontract the crew. So it doesn't make any financial sense to have your own planes. And the people behind Daedalus, I have to say, I question their ability to stand up a working airline. They have no aviation experience. These people, William Walters III and Tandria Capel, and the other ones, they're former State Department people. They worked in the medevac unit. They do extractions of medically vulnerable people, and they actually helped a lot during the pandemic, dispersing the vaccines all over the world. They seem to have gotten pissed that the Biden administration didn't expand their operation, and so they all quit and have become MAGA aligned people. They've been going to, Mar-a-Lago award ceremonies and blah, blah, blah. And now they have this contract. They're all medical professionals. They're not airline workers. So
they're like, I'm mad that Biden didn't do more medicine for more people. So I'm going to go hang out with the guy who was like, hey, pregnant people, stop taking acetaminophen.
Correct.
Okay. Hey, let's hang out with that guy who thinks no one should be getting any vaccines for anything.
Yeah. I don't understand.
It's just it's very on brand, right? It's ideologically incoherent. It's logically incoherent. These guys not being likely to be able to manage their actual project in an efficient way, or making financially ridiculous choices. It's all very on brand. This is the exact flavor of shit show that I honestly expected.
Absolutely. Well, Gillian, we certainly hope that Daedalus, that it works out as well as the Tale of Icarus worked out. Yes. To be sure, that would be most ideal. Well, we got to talk.
With no migrants on board.
No
absolutely. Absolutely. That's we want it to be only the worst of the worst. So let's name these airlines that are participating, because that's going to bring us right into our next topic, which is why aren't all of the publications, why aren't all the media outlets, why aren't they all doing this too, Gillian?
Okay, so just to name and shame first, Global X, Eastern Air Express, those are the biggest ones. Avelo, Journey Aviation, they do the small jet removals to Africa. There used to be a company called ATS or Griffin that did it. Their contract expired.
Well, more mythology,
and then,
Griffin.
Yeah. And then Omni does the Africa and Asia large jet removals. And then the last one is Key Lime Air, also known as Denver Air Connection. So right now, all of these airlines are like charter only. So you can't just like boycott them, except for Key Lime Air / Denver Air Connection. Now that Avelo is wrapping up things, I'd just like to encourage anyone who was focusing their ire on Avelo to send that Denver Air Connections direction, Key Lime Air's direction. They have 2 Embraers, which is like a commuter jet, that they were using for a while, and they've just expanded to 3. So now they have 3 dedicated aircraft that are doing shuttle flights every day.
Well, I'll say, as a potential billionaire, I promise never to spend any money with any of those charter companies.
Yeah.
The minute I become a billionaire, that's my vow.
Yeah. So, to get into my whole saga, the second part of your question, Trent, when I left the Washington Post, like I said, at first I was like, oh, I'll be right back. And then, I just enjoyed having opinions in public so much that I was like, no, I'll never go back, but, maybe I'll, get that columnist job at the Atlantic or whatever.
Right.
And then last May, it was like in the news, people sharing on Blue Sky that these people were being sent to South Sudan who weren't there, and that, their lawyers filed a bunch of motions. And, I used to be a flight attendant. My son is also like an aviation geek. We're always, tracking planes going over our house, etc. And so I just thought, I wonder if I can figure out what plane they're on, and just started poking around on different apps, and actually found it. And it's a whole long story, but probably a little bit technical and not very interesting. But basically, I was sort of sharing my thoughts and my reasoning of why I think this is the plane with other app geeks on the internet, and they were all like, "Oh shit, yeah, I think you're right." And it was over the Atlantic at the time, and it descended toward Shannon Airport in Ireland, which is a pretty common refueling stop for the U.S. military. And, I was like, well, the Irish people, not always their government, but the Irish people are pretty good on human rights. All of a sudden, it seemed like there was this opportunity to perhaps stop it. Mm-hmm. And so, I was trying to wake up friends in Ireland. It was 3 a.m, and I was trying to think yeah, exactly. Wake up, and I was trying, to figure, I thought do I try and figure out I can't figure out the jurisdiction. Is it the transport minister? Is it the human rights minister?
Who did they bother?
What do I do?
Right.
And, I emailed some activists there, nothing. And I knew that the time on the ground would be relatively brief. And so I just made this decision that I was going to call the airport police. Because they'll know who has jurisdiction, or if they'll know if it violates Irish law, if this counts as human trafficking in Irish law. And so I did. And they recorded the call. I didn't. But basically, I talked to them for 13 minutes and told them everything I knew, and just said, I know that our laws don't matter in your country, but a judge said they couldn't be removed, and they were removed anyway. And, maybe this is human trafficking under your laws, check the plane, And
it feels like they got kidnapped. It does.
It feels like a kidnapping. Yeah. These people who weren't supposed to be removed are shackled and removed on this private jet. So I made a decision. I thought, well, now that I've done this thing, I can keep it a secret, except that there's a recording of the call that's not under my control. And so I just thought, well, I'm just going to tell the truth. And so I, posted to Blue Sky what I did. And Irish people woke up and were like, holy shit. At that point, the plane had taken off and was already, it was headed to Djibouti. You can read the news for that whole saga. But, I was on Irish radio and it was like a bit of an incident for a minute. And, it really wraps into a lot of the protesting and activism that they've done in Ireland about these flights that are going to support Israel and their, weapons transports. It's just another example of their airport being used for shitty stuff.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't reporting on ICE flights at the time. I wasn't doing this as journalism, but that's how I found out that they're all shackled, that there's these dozens of planes happening, like flying around every day doing this, that there have been all these incidents in the past, that there are activists who are tracking them online in real time every day using tools that I already knew how to use. And so it did become a line of reporting for me. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only person covering ICE flights full time as a journalist.
Wow.
And after a couple of months, I started pitching only left-wing outlets. I'm not even going to bother with, legacy media.
Not even your old friends at WAPO? They're not going to help you out with this?
No, I mean, no comment. There's a lot of really
lovely
good
people there.
Some really good human beings that are in a really tough spot in that room. And I don't think that means that you shouldn't boycott them. It's tough.
We just hope that all those lovely people find exciting and lucrative jobs other places.
So. Absolutely.
So I pitched just a couple stories to, I'm not going to say who the outlet is because I think they're a good place and I'm not trying to name and shame them.
Sure.
I pitched a place that's doing really good work. They immediately responded, said, fuck yeah. We started talking about the stories and I said, by the way, just so you guys know for transparency, I did this thing in May, it has nothing to do with this reporting. I'm not going to do it while I'm reporting for you, and they were like, oh, that might be an issue. And basically for the next couple days, they were, what they told me is that they were trying to convince their executive editor to go along with it. And ultimately they said, this is a direct quote, I respect the hell out of what you did, but we can't work with you. And I basically, I've gotten a lot of silence and I, got kind of to all the places that I pitched. And I, after that experience, got paranoid about am I being blacklisted because I interfered, and just sort of thinking about this concept of interference.
Right.
I think all of the arguments of why objectivity in media is bullshit, are well trod and well reasoned, and I agree with them. But I don't think readers are aware of this sort of distinction, and I think that it actually I think it hurts journalists. I think it hurts trust with the reader.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of a capricious distinction anyway, the sort of fake objectivity.
Yeah.
So,
right.
In my bitchier moments when I felt like I was being blacklisted, I've been well, such and such reporter at the New York Times interferes when she agrees to report on something, some other story, if they'll leak to her about this story.
Yeah.
That's interference. When a weatherman is covering a hurricane and, they see someone floating away in their car and they go rescue him, they don't pull him off the story because they interfered.
No, they famous.
Right.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
when I tell my non-journalist friends about this, that like people won't work with me because I interfered, they don't get it. They're like, why?
Yeah.
Like,
Right. You said what you knew, and it gave with enough, like, to try to give people enough time to act on the information,
yeah.
which seems.
I mean,
right.
I reported what I thought was a crime in progress, right? And yeah, and so it's been interesting. So then, you know, to be honest, I just kind of stopped talking about it because I thought the reporting was more important. And eventually, through a friend, you know, was able to publish some stories in Rolling Stone, and I just didn't tell them about my interference. And that doesn't feel good because I'm a fucking reporter. It's my job to tell the truth, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
Right.
but now I have to, like, if I want to get information that I think is really important out, then I have to like be less human.
You're supposed to be objective, Gillian. You're supposed to see horrors coming across the human species, and you're supposed to say, "Nope, I'm removed from that. No big deal. I don't feel any sense." I mean, we can close our eyes and we can see this in 1933, 1934. We can see this. We can see. Oh, like, why did Hans like interfere in the story about the Fuhrer? You know, like, because like that's what always happens. Like, they're pushing, and unless we have institutions that are willing to stand up that are private, it's a slippery slope that gets slipperier faster.
Yeah, and I understand that like a lot of these interference issues, like a lot of them are there to keep like egomaniacs out, right? And to like keep really like,
which is reasonable,
wheeling and dealing out, which is totally reasonable.
Absolutely.
But I think you bringing up, you know, the Nazis is a very instructive point, that like this structure is not up to the times that we're in. And, you know, when I was thinking about whether I should call or not, you know, this book project that I've been working on, I used to write about history at the Post. I'm writing about all of these abolitionists who, you know, are writing for the Liberator while smuggling self-emancipated people to safety in Canada. Right? They're documenting what enslavers say about their own practices when they think nobody's looking, right? And, you know, while helping enslaved people. And so I feel if I'm honest about what I'm doing and not doing, and if I'm already writing for opinionated places and I'm already saying what my opinion is, that I think these flights are messed up, and if I'm only doing it when it's like a critical moment, there was no time for me to file a story. You know, when they're on the ground and Shannon, like,
well, like, are you supposed to not call the police ever? Like, what if you're being, you know, if you're being mugged, are you supposed to be like, well, I'm a journalist and I might need to write a story about this later, so I better not call the, like, what do you mean? Yeah, that seems pretty, like you said, a capricious line, right?
Yeah.
And it also goes to kind of an argument that happens in the social sciences all the time, which is about objectivity as well, which is like, some people really like the hair on the back of their neck just bristles when you ask them to do a positionality statement and like talk about who they are and what their history is that might impact their interpretation of the results. But it's like, you know,
never considered it ever.
Right. And they don't like it.
Yeah.
Even me, like, you know, when I learned about positionality statements and how to write them, in theory, I was like, yes, this makes sense because it helps bolster the interpretability of the results, and it helps people understand, like, because I was doing a bunch of participant observation and like ethnographic research. So I was like, obviously I have to talk about myself because I'm part of the research. But then when it came time to write it, I'd be like, well, I'm just a lady. I don't know. I'm just like because I'm white and I'm American and I'm researching other white Americans a lot of the time. And so I was just like, it's hard to do, but it turns out that it's actually very important to remember your role as a person in your story or in your research.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, we we are journalists, we are writers, we are, appraising the society, but we are human beings first. And,
Right.
I feel like it is good to have parameters set up to, as you noted, Gillian, right? Have some structure for us to work within, understand our limits, where our roles are, where we should be. But these are extraordinary times. It's very uncouth to break somebody's window in normal times, but when their house is on fire, right, we can make exceptions to break the window and escape, right? Grab somebody out. We need to sort of recalibrate. And I feel like, Caitlin, we spoke about this recently with one of our guests, right? Perhaps Marissa, when we were speaking about this, right? There's this desire that, like, actually the house isn't on fire, right?
Yeah.
Like, everything is fine. So don't panic. Like, just
breaking the glass in case of emergency is admitting that you're in an emergency, and that feels bad, right? The other crime I think you committed was treating the story of the people on the airplane as if they were real people that something bad could happen to, and that mattered, right? Yeah. And we've had that argument in social sciences as well, where, I gave this whole keynote talk at a conference about like ethics and data collection and like getting the actual buy-in from your participants and not thinking of them as like lab rats and stuff. And when I was done, one of the comments that I got back was like, if you insist on us treating our subjects like this, it will render our research impossible. And I was like, if it's impossible for you to do your research on people while treating them like they're people, then don't do that research.
Right. And like the construct of objectivity and the construct of like, you just have to watch from a distance, like the people who that works for are sociopaths, right? And the journalists who work within the confines of that structure because they think they have to, it takes a toll.
Yeah, of course, they're hurting themselves.
And like, I don't want to be like, think about the journalists, right? Like, the most important thing is like the migrants that this is happening to. But it weighs on you when you do these stories, and you don't, even if it's, accountability journalism, you're not actually a part of the accountability. You just sort of like take credit for it after the story publishes because someone else did something, and sometimes like you can be aware because you've reported the story, you're much more aware of like what is possible to change, to fix than your readers might be. And I just, but if you're like not allowed to say anything, it's just really frustrating. So I, like I said, I like stayed quiet about this for months and was kind of like embarrassed, or like, I guess I should be ashamed, even though I'm not ashamed. Like, I think I did the right thing. I wish it had worked,
Yeah.
Right.
And then, when in early January, when, I forget who reported it, Axios, I think, said that the New York Times and the Washington Post were both aware of the invasion of Venezuela before it happened and held the stories because they didn't want to hurt service members. I just got so pissed off because I was like, that's interference.
Yes.
You think not doing something is different from like proactively doing something, but it isn't. Like you made a decision that American soldiers are more important to you as an institution than the lives of these Venezuelan people or international law. You know, so then, I just sort of like posted about that on Blue Sky, and that was like the first time that I said anything. I was just like, I'm really pissed that they're calling this objectivity when it's actually interference, because I've had a lot of trouble getting really important reporting out because I'm a supposed interferer.
Right. Well, yeah. Another hypothetical, right? Like, say you are having like a night with the bros and you're drinking and your buddy is getting worked up about like his bitch ex-wife. And he says, you know what? I've got a Glock in the truck. I'm going over there.
Right.
It's interference to call the police about that.
Right. And it's
But
also
that's
the morally
essentially
correct thing to do.
right. And that's essentially what we had with Venezuela is like that bitch country, I'm going to steal their president.
Right.
And they were like, well, we shouldn't say anything because that would be,
They
interfering.
were like, well, this is going to be a great story once he kills her, but not yet. We'll just write it up and we'll hold it. And they didn't report in their story that they knew beforehand. They didn't report that they were interferers. They, the Axios found out. And Axios probably found out because it probably weighed on the consciences of some human beings in the newsroom.
Somebody was having an ethical struggle about it because that's natural. Yeah.
You can choose not to decide, but you still have made a choice, right? We have to shake ourselves out of our sort of daze and realize that people are being hurt right now, and that a part of the job of the media isn't to sort of like hover above everything, being like, well, I guess like the fascism is okay because like 50% voted for it, right? Or whatever, right? Like we don't need that. We need a media that, as you noted before, Gillian, at the very beginning, it's something that here on the program, as well as across liberal currents in general, we harp on a lot: authenticity, right?
Yeah.
You've got to be who you are. It has to show in what you're doing.
It's real put up or shut up hours here.
Yes, exactly. You need a media that says, you know what, pal, like actually what the government is doing is not good. And like we should not be pretending as institutions, as organizations, as individuals. We should not be pretending that this is okay, that this is acceptable. Like when you talk to people, and in my former line of work, as well as just being a human. I love to go talk to people. I hate the self-checkout, right? And when you talk to people, they know it's bad. They know that this is bad. They're uncomfortable talking about it sometimes because like maybe they supported this or maybe they didn't fight back against it, right? And after this is all over, there will only be two types of people. It will either be the people who pushed back or the people who didn't say anything. And, right now is those put up or shut up hours, but we need the media as well. We need Jake Tapper yelling about that instead of about how Biden is losing his mind, which we all knew, by the way. We need that. We need people being angry and everyone's seeing that they're angry, because if you turn on Newsmax, if you turn on Fox News, they're never happy. They're always screaming about how we're trying to destroy the country, how it's acceptable that somebody should be shot in the face. That's where's that interference?
They also have a lot of stories that they just don't report because they know that there's no slanted way that they could report things and still have their viewers think that there's like an acceptable version of events in, their sort of right-wing MAGA world. So they just don't report it at all, which, yes, is interference.
Weird. I think, and we have more examples, I think, every day of representatives of this administration coming on television and lying and being told that is a lie, which is great. We need more of that, including things like how many of the people processed by ICE have a criminal record, how many of them are citizens. Right. And what did she say? She said some huge number, and then they were like, no, your agency said 20.
Your own data says 75% of the
and
people
let's
detention have no convictions, no arrest record.
Right. And even the ones who do, like you said, a lot of them have served their time. So why are we treating them like they're forever evil? They're unsavable. That's not how we're supposed to think of things.
We don't send people to the gulags even when they do reprehensible things.
Right. There's some people that I've talked to and it's like, they did have sex with a minor. That's why, it's not, they're not all, perfect victims or whatever, right? Some of them are reprehensible perpetrators. And
Right.
that doesn't mean that they deserve to have all of these laws violated and end up in some prison of a country they've never even been to. And we know from history that they go after the reprehensible people in society first. Once it's
so they can get the
for
permission
you to violate the rights of a guy who's done something terrible, then it moves to, well, the guy who did a fraud. Then it moves to just someone from that country. Then it's somebody who was arrested one time because there was a racist cop and it was quickly dropped. Now we see the Hmong American citizen who was driven around, over the weekend. And
no shirt in sub-zero temperatures.
And what I posted at the time, before we even knew that he was an American citizen, he was wearing boxers, Crocs, and a blanket. And something that I think a lot of people don't know is that, when you're in ICE detention, you're generally in a gray jumpsuit, right? When you're actually heading out for your removal flight to be deported, they take back the jumpsuit and they give you back whatever you were arrested in.
Right.
Whatever you were captured in to wear on the flight. So if you're
this
deported
grandpa,
in December, if you're deported in December, I've talked to a lot of people who have been deported to Vietnam and Laos recently, and they're like, well, I was lucky because I was arrested in February and it took 6 months for my case to process, so I had a flannel and a coat on the flight. But there were people in tank tops and flip-flops. And they keep, just like, you hear all the time about jails being kept freezing cold. They keep the planes freezing cold. One man that I talked to said that, like, the agents are wearing heavy coats the whole flight because it's so cold. And there's people sitting next to him in a tank top, like elderly people being deported. The ICE agents that did that to that man when they thought he was undocumented or that he had a final removal order, they did that knowing full well that he would be deported.
He was going to be stuck in that.
But what do we expect when we have roaming bands of federal, militarized enforcement? Just randomly trying to discern what an American looks like, right? That's essentially what this task is. We have the dumbest people that you went to high school with trying to discern what an American looks like, and surprise, they're choosing all of the white people who as Americans, and they're choosing anyone who looks anything darker than Caitlin as
that's a really high bar.
Right, this is the palest podcast out, right? But that's real. It's a trifecta here, right? But we look at it and we say this is an obvious consequence. If we're trying to deport people from Mexico, we're trying to deport people, then we're just going to choose brown people, and it's like, oh shit, like that guy was born in Pittsburgh. Like he's not from like Guadalajara, he's from Kentucky, right? But this is what,
and specifically that they're going specifically after Hmong people is such a slap in the face to everything that might resemble reasonableness, because a lot of people in America, I don't think they know who the Hmong people are, the circumstances under which they came to this country. I had the amazing privilege of, in my little cohort of 2 people in my graduate program, it was me and a lovely young lady who is Hmong, and her family. She told me all about her family. We all read The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down, such a great book. And I learned about like the history of her family and the things that they went through, the absolute atrocities that they suffered in Vietnam, the way that they helped America during that time, and that they came here as refugees and suffered poverty and discrimination, have always been exoticized and animalized and othered. And then now that they're just specifically being like, we want to round up all the Hmong. What is your problem? Disgusting behavior. And that's my Hmong rant.
A lot of them were being persecuted in Laos because they had helped American troops. And
Yeah.
that Vietnamese woman, Melissa Tran, that I was talking about earlier, the reason that she was a refugee, she came over like 1990 or 1991. The reason that she was a refugee is because her older brother was the product of a marriage with a relationship with a Vietnamese woman and an American soldier during the Vietnam War. And her entire family was being persecuted by the Vietnamese government because of him. And so that's why they had to come. That's why they were refugees. First, they went to the Philippines, and then they were able to, get refugee status and come here. So that doesn't change now that she committed a crime, 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So she's back in Vietnam now. She's staying with distant relatives, and she's scared. She's scared that the persecution that her family experienced when she was a child is going to continue.
Just absolutely breathtakingly dreadful. Did you have something you wanted to say, Caitlin?
No, I was just thinking how I introduced the show with we're going to talk about the most fun stuff.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Well,
Promise fulfilled.
There's irony dripping in your introductions, Caitlin.
Every time.
Well, a great friend of the program, Gillian Brockell. Thank you so much for finding some time in your busy day, life, existence to talk with us, educate us, our listeners and our viewers. They crave information. Don't believe me? You can just go ask them. It's true. But before we let you go, I actually have three things. Okay, before we let you go, what can the people who have just listened to us, who are rage steaming, steam is pouring out of their ears.
How do we use that energy?
Right. What do we do there? And then the other two, their layups. Where can the people learn more, and where can they find all of your wonderful stuff?
Thank you. I think the most important thing that people could do right now is the airport nearest their house that is being used for deportations. Find out who owns that. In a lot of cases, it's the county or it's a state commission or, the governor has control of it. And pressure those people to, set up a live stream camera and require ICE to load and unload their flights onto this camera. This is something that was done in Seattle. Unfortunately, you can't stop ICE flights from landing at a public use airport. There's a whole court case, and so I think the most important thing for gathering information, for witnessing, for one day when justice does hopefully return to this land, there will be that documentation. I think also having the camera may prevent some of the worst abuses, although it doesn't prevent all of them. Another thing you can pressure them to do is to cancel contracts with ICE Air partners. So if they have regular passenger service with Denver Air Connection beyond their ICE flights, cancel it. If Signature Aviation or Millionaire or AGI, who are the refuelers and the aircraft servicers, are servicing these planes, cancel the contract if they're going to continue working with ICE. I think that's the most important thing that could happen right now. You can send a letter to the Department of Transportation, our real world character secretary, and say hey, FAA regulations that apply to every other flight should apply to these too. Right. It's worth doing to feel better. I think the chances of that actually changing, right now, perhaps limited. So I think, finding out about these airports and witnessing, I think, are the most important things.
So you can look that up on the Human Rights First website. Where is that?
I mean, you can see where airplanes are landing at Human Rights First. It's called the ICE Flight Monitor. They do a monthly report. You can also follow a guy named JJ in DC on Blue Sky. He's amazing. He's a better flight tracker than I am. And he has gotten to a level of expertise with these planes now where he's able to predict their schedules. And,
Amazing.
And so he's, he'll work with any activists or citizens who contact him of like, tell me when there's a plane coming to my town. So you can follow me on Blue Sky. I'm at gbrockell.bsky.social. And then the other thing is that part of the reason I am talking about this now is because I'm partnering with a friend of mine, the critic Soraya McDonald, and we are starting our own shop. I never wanted to be a girl with a Substack, but I would love to be a part of a nonprofit worker-run cooperative. So that is what we are working on setting up right now.
We love it.
Our holding company that's not nonprofit that we're using to get this started up is called Linda Brent Media. Linda Brent was the pen name of Harriet Jacobs, the abolitionist.
Right.
And so you can check out that website. You can help us fundraise. You can follow us. You can listen to us and support us as we go through this process. You can become one of the founders if you are a journalist who is sick of this shit. So that's what we're working on right now. And I am really looking forward to having just a way to report this stuff with the urgency that it deserves. And my Mother Jones story will be out next month, and it's going to be a banger in all the worst ways.
We will link to all of that in the description of this podcast.
Gillian, sign us up. We are sick of this shit as well. New verb just dropped, to Schumer, right? That's where you write a strongly worded letter.
Let me tell you something as a former flight attendant. I had Chuck Schumer on my plane many times, and he was a complete dick, would never turn off his phone. Sir, it's time to turn your phone off. Sir, it's time to turn your phone. Rolling the eyes, brushing you off with his hand. Every time I had him on, the pilot had to come out and be like, sir, you're causing a delay.
2 of the 3 people on this podcast have horror stories about Chuck Schumer. So everybody does.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get mine.
Clearly hopefully he'll be out of power when you get yours,
Yeah.
Be some guy at the supermarket being a jerk.
Who knows? Maybe I've been on a plane that he's delayed by not putting his phone away.
You may very well have been.
Everyone has been on a plane that Chuck Schumer has affected. Well, again, Gillian Brockell, you are the best. And we know that might be considered interference, but we'll manage.
Whatever. Continue to follow your heart, because I think it's right.
Yes.
I think your instincts are right. So keep doing that.
I have to say, I sleep a lot better at night than I ever did when I was pretending to be objective. I have not been able to turn that into money, but, or enough money to live on. But, I sleep better at night, and that's what I keep going with. Like, well, I'm sleeping better.
There are things that are more important than money.
The happy days are coming.
The happy days are coming.
They're coming.
Here. Yeah.
We're heading towards them full steam. We're doing what we can. So.
And that's true. That understanding a question is half of an answer, and this has of course been half the answer. And until we do this thing all over again, well, catch you real soon. All right.
Thanks for listening to Half the Answer, presented by Liberal Currents. You can find Half the Answer anywhere you get your podcasts. Liberal Currents is an entirely listener and subscriber-funded publication, which includes programs like Half the Answer and Neon Liberalism. So, if you like what you've heard and wish to contribute, you may do so at liberalcurrents.com and through Patreon. And remember, understanding a question is half the answer.